The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So if you're with us yesterday, we played a lot of Jason Kelsey's retirement news conference. About 40 minutes of it, he talked the other day. Cried through most of it. You know, they say athletes die two deaths, once when their career is over and once when they actually die. And you could feel the pain of a guy who spent 13 years in the NFL. I mean, he accomplished everything you could possibly accomplish. Played in 2 Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl, is going to go to the Hall of Fame, one of the best centers who ever played the game. What else does he have to do? But it's hard. It's hard to walk away. And in the next hour, we're going to play some of what Joey Votto said last week on the Dan Patrick Show. He's 40 years old, played 17 years, all with the Cincinnati Reds, was the MVP in 2010. He made the All-Star team 6 times. I mean, he's a marginal Hall of Famer, and he has not really played well. He's been hurt the last couple of years. He's played less than a full season combined, hit around 200, but he loves the game. And he wants to play. And what you'll hear is a real heartfelt plea, if you want to call it that, a desire to continue to play baseball, even though he's not playing at the highest level. It's hard when you've been to the mountaintop and you have to get back to the real world and live a life like normal people. It's tough, and I have sympathy for him, even though he's done everything you could possibly do in baseball, it would seem, except, win a World Series. But he's an icon in Cincinnati, and still there's something he feels left in the tank, and he wants to use it up playing. And whether he gets a chance or not, we'll have to see. I would say the chances aren't great, but he is a guy who's a leader. Cincinnati kept him around for 17 years. They must have seen something more than just his skill on the field, and he would be a big addition to a clubhouse. It's just a question if anybody wants to invest even the major league minimum in him. It would seem that maybe a contending team might want him around, extra bat, play first base, but we'll see. So we'll get to that. Also, Gilbert Arenas just spewing nonsense again. And in about 20 minutes, I'm going to play some of the interview that he did yesterday with Dan Patrick. It's a skilled interviewer taking down a guy who's, well, let's face it, he said some wild things in the past, including why he wound up in Washington. Remember this? This is Gilbert Arenas after he became a free agent, was a second-round pick with Golden State and played out his option there and hit the free agent market, and said it came down to between the Clippers and the Wizards, and he flipped a coin, and the coin came up Clippers, but just to go in the opposite direction, he signed with the Wizards, and then later said, no, that really wasn't true. So he's got some nonsense about why the NBA doesn't have defense anymore, and he blames it on the European players. And good for Dan Patrick for really picking apart that ridiculous notion. And you'll finally hear Gilbert go, yeah, well, I was being sarcastic. Okay, great. Jayden Daniels still on the board. They haven't picked him yet. The rumors continue. Is he going to be picked number 2? Could Chicago take him number 1? We'll deal with all that in the next hour as well. But Georgetown lost again last night. Hey, what else is new? They lost to Providence 71-58. They are 2-17 in the Big East this year. They have won a total of six Big East games over the last 3 years, and 5 of them have been against DePaul. I mean, it's really, really bad for them. Now, Ed Cooley's the coach, and as I've said, I think Ed Cooley does among the best press conferences I've ever heard. He was great when he was introduced just about a year ago. I think March 20th was the day when he replaced Patrick Ewing, and all of his news conferences, especially after losses, they're great. And he was great again last night. So Georgetown plays St. John's on Saturday. That's their final regular season game. St. John's is kind of on the bubble. They're fighting to get into the NCAA tournament. So if Georgetown winds up, 2-18 and then 9-22 for the season, it pretty much mirrors what they've done the last 2 years under Patrick Ewing. 2 years ago, they were 9-21, 2-17 in the conference. They had a game canceled because of COVID. And then last year, they were 7-25 and went 2-18 in the conference. Again, both wins over, well, they had one win over DePaul last year, one over Butler. And then this year, they get the 2 wins over DePaul. I mean, I believe in him. I think he's going to turn things around, but it hasn't happened yet. And last night, he looked at what they did, and I watched most of this game. They were in it, but as has happened to them throughout the season, when it comes down to crunch time, the better team takes over, and that's what Providence did. I mean, they won the game by 13 points. Devin Carter had a big game. He had 24 points for them, and Georgetown just could not match them. This was Cooley after the loss.
This was a very winnable game. Like, as winnable if it's the biggest game we had all year. If there ever was a time for us to get a win, today was it. And we had probably 8 open looks, 4 out of 5 possessions. Normally we're a pretty good 10-toe three-point shooting team. You go 4 for 20. You know, if you make 2 of them in that stretch, I think it was just about 6 or 7 minutes, probably a single-digit game, back-to-back to back-to-back. Not one of them went in. But that's where you got to hang your hat on culture of toughness on the defensive end. That's where you hang your hat on. The ball's not always going to go in. But if you are resilient defensively, right, you're going to give yourself a chance to win in under 2 or 3 minutes.
Well, the last game was against Xavier on Saturday, and they shot well, 32 of 62, 51%. And they lost 98-93. Now, he took off on his team on that one because he said, hey, when you score 93 points in a college basketball game, you ought to win. Last night, they shot 35%, including, as he mentioned, 4 for 20 from 3. And that's not going to get it done either. Now, among the other highlights or lowlights of this game, depending on how you want to look at it, the crowd, so to speak, they had 5,200 announced attendance there. There's a big crowd behind the bench wearing black for Providence. They were rooting on Providence. And at the end of the game, as Providence is making its run to put it away, you hear, let's go Friars, let's go Friars. And this was the reaction Cooley had to that.
I mean, that's probably the 4th school that did that. That's okay. It's okay. I'm glad they came to the game. But, again, this is the 4th program I've been part of reestablishing and building it, right? It doesn't happen overnight. A lot of frustration on supporters, fans, students. That's okay. That's part of the deal. We played a damn good team, a very physical team, and they had a player who could single-handedly win games sometimes on his own. So give him credit on that. So it's okay. I mean, eventually that'll change. Right now it's just not that time.
Well, the change is also going to include interest in the program. There was a time when I didn't think that John Thompson III would be fired. I thought that John Thompson II, who was still alive during his son's tenure, had too much control over the program, and it just wasn't going to happen. And really, what did him in was attendance. They weren't drawing people to the game, and when you play in that arena, it really compounds things because the capacity of Capital One Arena is 20,356. Last night, they had, for a Big East game, senior night, final home game of the year, including that big group of Providence fans that came down to cheer on a team that's probably going to be in the NCAA tournament. They had 5,287. And we've had this debate for quite a while. The big problem with Georgetown is the access. I don't think it's money. They could get an arena built on campus. The problem is you can't get on and off the campus. The access just isn't good enough. So they play these games in an arena which, even if you were to double the attendance from last night, even if you would have had 10,000 people instead of 5,000 people, the place is half empty. I mean, it's a tough atmosphere. When you have a smaller atmosphere at Maryland at Xfinity Center, at least you got a pretty good student section. They bring that flag down. It's just a more, it feels more like a college atmosphere. And this atmosphere for Georgetown has always felt like, unless, it's a really big game and the team is good and it's a traditional rival like Syracuse, though Syracuse is not in the Big East anymore. But if it's a big game and the team is good, occasionally you can get a good crowd in there. And some years ago, they played Duke, And Duke was Duke then, top 10 team, and Georgetown won, and they stormed the court. That atmosphere was great. But, even if you pump things up, even if you get to be like a 500 team next year, you're still playing at an arena which is really too big for a school like that, unless it's a powerhouse, unless, the next Patrick Ewing walks on the campus and you have a contending team for the national championship. That's tough to do, and it doesn't happen all that often. And those guys, the Ewings of the world, if they're that good, they stay 1 year. It's not like, Patrick Ewing was there for 4 years, so they were able to build that powerhouse and have big crowds at the Capitol Center, and those incredible games that they had against St. John's at Madison Square Garden, where that was sold out. That's a pro arena, and it was packed and it was loud. It's going to be a tough putt to get this done, to get people excited about going to Georgetown basketball games at an arena which is, actually going to be abandoned by the owner. He's about to hijack his teams to Virginia. So what's going to be left in that arena except Georgetown basketball and some Mystics games? It's going to be tough. And this is Cooley on the question of, can you have a good home team, because they're 1-9 in the conference at home this year. They only win over DePaul. Can you do this at that building?
We're going to win in this arena, right? We're going to. It's frustrating. It's frustrating. The answer to that is say thank you to the seniors that are leaving and recruit. Right? It's not going to happen overnight. There's no magical wand, right? Bottom line is you need some more players. You need some more help. That's why we have an incredible staff. That's why we do a great job evaluating. You don't recruit, you evaluate. Who can fit at Georgetown and who can play for me as the leader. That's what we'll do a great job identifying as this season wraps up. But that's how you get better. You recruit your way out, you evaluate your way out, and you instill the culture of toughness, togetherness, gratitude, and appreciation.
That's how you used to get better. You get better now by paying players more money, appealing to their pride and all that. That's great. You get some real scrappy guys. But to get stars, you got to pay them now. You got to pay them to come. And I don't know if Cooley – I like Cooley. I like him a lot, and I love his news conferences, and I love his fire. But is that going to be possible with everything they're up against, including, as I've just gone through, the arena and the fact that they're in a big city? This is kind of unusual for a big city. We don't have this like in New York, only when St. John's is really great, and they're not. Boston, no. Chicago, no. Big cities, they're pro towns. And can you do this in a pro town? He's preaching positivity, and when asked about that last night, not surprisingly said,
the day I stepped on this campus, I had that thought, right? That's an everyday thought. And that conversation of possibility is something that I'm going to continue to preach until we get back to the mountaintop. And it won't be easy. It won't be. We play an incredible conference. There's great coaches in the league. I love our young, upcoming coaches in the league. Our league is healthy. This is the pain of growth. This is the pain of change and the pain of transition, right? But we'll be okay. It's not my first rodeo. We're going to be more than okay here at Georgetown.
Well, there is this, what remains after the St. John's game, the possibility of a miracle. And a miracle actually did happen 3 years ago, but in reality it set the program back. Now, if they lose to St. John's, it'll be 9-22, 2-18 in the conference going into the Big East tournament next week. The miracle that happened under Patrick Ewing happened during the 2021 season, where fans weren't allowed in because of COVID. And for the Ewing run, that was his best year. He went 13-13, 7-9 in the Big East. And they go into the tournament, and they beat Marquette by 19. I think this was all 4 days in a row, if I'm not mistaken. They beat Villanova by 1. They beat Seton Hall by 8. And in the Big East championship game, they blew out Creighton by 25 points. Now, they wound up losing to Colorado in the NCAA tournament by 23, but the reality was this team had no business being in the NCAA tournament, but they got there with a miracle run. The team was better that year. They had a better record than they have this year, again, with just 9 wins total and 2 in the conference. But, Mr. Positive selling this.
Tournament play's crazy. Crazy things happen in tournament play. Crazy things happen. So, you got to take one game at a time. And there's no greater tournament in any sport in America than that Big East tournament. For those of you that have been fortunate to go and feel it, the vibe in there, the energy in there, it's not even close. You know, played in other tournaments, it's not even close to what the best tournament in the world is. And it's a pleasure to be part of it. Not only that, it's an honor to be the head coach at Georgetown, to represent Georgetown in that tournament. Anything's possible. Is it some long odds? Hell yeah, it is. But you never know. Stay positive.
The late Abe Pollin would have loved this guy. Abe used to call himself the nutty optimist, and he used to go into every season for the Bullets and say, you never know, Now, they had some pretty decent teams in his later years with Gilbert Arenas, but they really weren't championship contenders. But, he had his dream from 1978. It's that team that finally won it all. That was a really good team. I mean, that team was, the backbone was Wes Unseld and Elvin Hayes, and they had played in the finals in 1975 and gotten swept by Golden State, but they were the favorites in that. And then the 78, 79, they make it both years. Even with West, they made it in 1971. So 70s, they were a really good team. And he continued to think that way into the 90s, and unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Cooley is, look, he's off to his first year, learning on the job. I would have expected a better team this year, but they haven't been. And I'll tell you one thing, he's won every news conference. He's got that. Team's been bad. News conferences, very good. Let's see what he does in year 2. Let's see who he's able to bring in. And let's see what they've got for next year. Or, as he says, crazy things happen in tournament play, and who knows what happens starting next week at Madison Square Garden. Coming up, the Meshuggah Gilbert Arenas with a hot take on European players, which is just doused by Dan Patrick. We'll get to that next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So if you listen to this show on a regular basis, I play a lot of Dan Patrick's interviews or parts of them. And there's 2 reasons. One, he's got the best guest booker in the business, Todd Fritz, who I've known for 35 years. And he's also, I believe, the best sports interviewer in the business. Bob Costas is great, but Costas doesn't really work much anymore. Patrick's on every day. And he does great interviews, interesting interviews, has a great interviewing style. And when he comes across something that's ridiculous, he doesn't start yelling at the guy, hey, that's stupid. Listen to how he picks apart what is a ridiculous take from Gilbert Arenas. Gilbert Arenas, who destroyed the franchise here, and then it's been out of the NBA now for it might be 10 years. And he does a podcast now. He keeps himself visible so that when he has something to say, people pay attention. So this was yesterday, Arenas on the Patrick Show, with Dan picking apart his take on what European players have done to defense in the NBA.
The NBA took away aggression. They took away aggression to open up the EuroLeague. When they first started getting here, it was too rough for them. You're talking about Europeans. They didn't make it. Eventually, they softened the rules. They didn't soften the rules for the Americans. They softened the rules to open up international. Also talked about they don't play defense, not athletic. What are you trying to say here, Gilbert?
No. Okay, so, the idea at the All-Star break was, how do we change the game back to more defense? Everything became about defense. How do we make it more defensive and competitive? And my whole thing then was, why aren't you crediting the offense? The offense just got better. There's element in this game that's gotten better, and you can't rewind what you did. And what was done probably mid-2000s is trying to figure out how we can make this game, the game global, right? And by opening up the game global means bringing the internationals. So if you think about like how the game was in the early 2000s, it was a lot of physical play, right? Only, like Dirk was, there was really only 3 or 4 European players that really survived in that brute type of era. So it was one of the ideas of just like making it a 3-point, the Dan Tony system come in, giving that type of system legs, to move up and down, no defense, just scoring 7 seconds, no defense, no foul, threes and layups. It was the D'Antoni system.
But Gilbert, is there a difference between soft and finesse?
It's the same. It depends. But finesse and soft is the same, right? It's not. It's one and the same.
Okay, you go on to say you go to college to learn defense. What college do Europeans go to? They have no athleticism. They have no speed, no jumping ability. They're a liability on defense. There are 150 Euros in the league today. Name the top defenders. And then you mentioned that Giannis is in there and Rudy Gobert. Other than that, they're just offensive players.
Yes.
And that's bad for the NBA.
No, it's great for the NBA because it opened up scoring.
But you're saying it's bad for the NBA because these guys, the league is softer. The fact that LeBron at 39 is averaging 25 a game, you point that out as well. So you would like to go back to when it was more physical.
No, it's bad. It's bad. Like the Euro is bad if you want defense in. So I'm saying the Euros expanded this game. They bring in the 5-man that can shoot the 3, which means the court is open. So now, because the court is open, all the athletic guys can get to the rim. So it became a very great game offensively. So if you want to push the idea of we want defense, then let's say, okay, well, take away the guys that expanded this game. If you don't like that idea, then be quiet. It was more of the sarcastic way of saying, just leave the game the way it is because it's expanded. There's no more Shaquille O'Neals and the dinosaur power forwards that sit down there and play brute game. These guys are coming in at 6'10", 6'11", 7'6", and they can shoot the 3. So now that they can shoot the 3, guys who are just athletic can live better too. So it's popularized the game. So it's gonna just get better because.
Well, wait, I'm having a hard time following what your message is because it sounds like you're anti-European, that they've ruined the game and it's bad for American players.
No. See, so that was the sarcastic part. If you're saying the game is being ruined because there's no defense, then I'm saying, okay, the guys who made it more offensively great, who brought in more money into the game, they did it because of their skill. Mm-hmm. So if you don't like the way the game is now, then blame them. And since you're not going to blame them, then just be quiet of the whole idea of putting in all these new rules. Because if you put in a 3 second, there's no 3 seconds, everyone's going to shoot more threes. So that's not going to help. You put in the hand checking, that's not going to help. So just let it go. Just enjoy the game for what it is.
You don't think the Joker could survive back in the 90s?
Yeah, the Joker. Okay, so think about what I'm saying. So if we wanted to go into that part of it, the Euros that are really expanding this game are all big men, right? You take out Luka. Who is your next best Euro point guard, right? And then who is your top Euro shooting guards? Who is your top Euro small forwards? So it's just the bigs. Even back then, most of the Euro bigs are the ones that's coming into this league dominating because they have a skill that the American bigs do not have. I mean, you have Wagner, who they put at the shooting guard sometimes. He's 6'11". That's where the game has changed. You can't rewind it.
I think it's Wagner, by the way, not
Wagner.
Wagner.
Yeah, Wagner.
I mean, let's pronounce it correctly. European style.
Yeah, so for an American style, for an athletic kid, the Euro has done something that we're just not teaching over here, and that's skilled. That's team. That's the understanding of the game overall. So when you have them in a game and they're pushing the limits, that means everything goes up. Popularity goes up, money goes up, right? If the game didn't expand to like a Euro style, there wouldn't be $350 million contracts. No. That's the Euro style. So if you don't like where the game is, then let's blame. And it was the more sarcastic way of saying, if you don't like the way the game is, then blame the Euros, and then let's go back to 85 basketball and see how you like that one.
And then you said no one would guard Iverson. They couldn't guard Iverson in today's game?
No. I mean, he's one of those specialty players because you're going to look at his field goal percentage, which is not the real field goal percentage if you put him in today's game because their game is wide open. There's no Eric Snows and all of that will be on his team, right? So now you have a guy who's 6'1", 6'2", if that.
What was peak Iverson like?
Peak Iverson was demanding all 5 guys to pay attention to him. Every single guy on that floor was trying to stop Iverson. So we were loading up boxes and elbows, right? We knew he was going all right, but but he's 160 pounds, right? That doesn't exist in today's game, right? A guy who's fast, quick, 60 pounds, coming through the lane, full speed. So he had the mentality of a Westbrook, and he was trying to score 50. That's the difference. Like when Luka and Jokic come into the game, they're not trying to score 50, right? If they're going to get it because of how they play, but they're not trying. It's like Westbrook mixed with Giannis, mixed with someone who's 160 pounds.
But Kobe would try to score 50 a night.
Yes. Yeah. Like from my era, you have Kobe, you have Allen Iverson. That's about it.
Tracy McGrady?
Tracy, but there's a lot more players like Tracy here. But because of who Tracy was, right? You're giving the guys more attempts now, right? So it's not like what Iverson doing. Like you got to take his percentage versus the volume of where his team was shooting. So if they're only taking 80 shots and he was taking 25% of them, you just move it up and see. So he'd be about 39 of 41. But, it's one of those.
Wait, that's what he would average?
Probably. Like me, you give me more shooting, I'll just have more assists. So I'll get into like the 30, like average 29, maybe 33, 32. I'll go from 6 assists maybe to 10.
God. Gilbert Arenas with Dan Patrick. Very skillful interview. Let's unpack some of this nonsense. Starts out, sounds like he's anti-Euro, right? I mean, Dan nailed that. The game is opened up now because they did it for the Euros, and they didn't go to college. Gilbert went for a year, by the way, and they don't learn defense. And so you got all these bigs who can shoot, and that's what you do now. And then when pressed, I was being sarcastic. No, you weren't. You were being an idiot, like you always were when you were here, like when you brought the guns in the locker room and pooped in the shoes because you thought it was funny. And then to go at the end where he's saying Allen Iverson would average 41 points a game. No, he wouldn't. And Gilbert would average 32 points, but he's so unselfish that he would have more assists. He would average 10 assists a game instead of 6. Stop. Just stop. And he's entertaining. Yeah, people like the podcast. He still gets big rounds of applause when he comes back. The team, they don't have much to celebrate in the last 45 years, coming up on 46 this year since the last time they won the title. And so they kind of celebrate the years where they were pretty good, like they made it to the second round of the playoffs and Gilbert was the big star. I mean, really. And so when he makes these ridiculous comments about European players, he's kind of trying to polish his own apple there, and that's what he got around to there at the end. Like, if I played in today's game, I'd average 32 points and 10 assists a game. No, you wouldn't. You would not. And Allen Iverson would not be able to drive the lane like he did. I mean, they still have bigs now. Yeah, they're outside on the perimeter, but when they're playing defense, they do get back, and they would be able to swat some of those shots away that he got inside. I mean, Iverson's a great player, tremendous player, incredible player. But come on, let's stop. Let's stop this nonsense. And good for Dan for pointing out what a bunch of hooey that was. All right, Zion Williamson speaks. Zion Williamson staying pretty healthy this year. He's having a good year. He's averaging 22 points, 5 assists for the Pelicans, who are having a good year. They have the number 5 seed. And looks like, cross your fingers, that maybe the injury problems are behind him. But he said last night after they beat Toronto, they beat the hell out of Toronto, 139 to 98. He only played 26 minutes because it was such a blowout. He said, if I'm in the All-Star game, I'll do the dunk contest. But if I'm not doing it. He's been an All-Star twice, 2021, second year in the league, and then last year. Didn't make it this year. And the dunk contest has, I think, run its course. The winner of it the last 2 years is Mac McClung, who I think has played in 4 NBA games in his career. He's a dunk specialist. That's what he does. He's like the red panda, the woman who spins plates on her unicycle. He's got this one thing that he does well, but he's not an NBA player. And so to put him in the all-star competition is ridiculous. Yes, not everybody who participates in the skills is an all-star, but he's not really even an NBA player. He's a G League player. He had a couple of years at Georgetown, played a year at Texas Tech. And, he's fun to watch, and he does some nice things, but that's not really what the spirit of the dunk contest is all about. I mean, it started when Dr. J was the best player in basketball, and Dr. J won the dunk contest, and Michael Jordan participated. LeBron never has, but, stars did at one point. So I would say this about Zion Williamson. If he wants to participate in the dunk contest, I think it would be great. But given his injury history, I think the Pelicans discourage this in a big way. He's too heavy. He's still too heavy. And when you're bringing down that much weight on your knees and on your ankles, you're going to have problems. Those guys who fly through the air with the greatest of ease, they're not 270 pounds or whatever he weighs now. He may weigh over 300. So it's a nice thought. I don't think it's going to happen. I think what he's doing is he's saying, yeah, you left me out of the All-Star game this year. You could have had me in the dunk contest. Well, if you're going to elect him to be an All-Star just so he can be in the dunk contest, which has probably run its course, as has the All-Star game, by the way. If they do away with it like they did with the Pro Bowl in football, nobody will shed a tear about that. I mean, they talked all this time about how they were going to be competitive, and they went back to the old system of East versus West, and it was a joke. You had almost 400 points scored. If nobody's going to play the game of basketball, which includes some defense, there's really no point in having it. And the skills competition, the only good part of it, there was only one small part, and it lasted a very short period of time because they didn't do it in rounds. It was only one set for each, and that was Steph Curry versus Sabrina Ionescu in the three-point shootout. That was entertaining. That was good. But it's not enough to fill up an evening, and that's what the skills competition has become. You have to have a full evening of stuff, and the other stuff just wasn't good enough. It just was not, and the dunk contest included on that, and I don't think Zion Williamson participating in it is going to save it. Players can dunk. We see that all the time, and if you take the ball off Shaq's head, that's great. You jump over a car, whatever you're doing, it's fine, but it's been there, done that, and it's played out, and probably needs to go away. But kind of a nice gesture there by Zion Williamson. Coming up, rumors from the Combine, what Rich Eisen says he's heard about Jayden Daniels, plus what Ryan Leaf says he would do if he were the Chicago Bears and to draft Caleb Williams. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. So do you really want a 14-team playoff in college football when we haven't even had a 12-team playoff yet? Wilbon going crazy last night on PTI about that, the state of college football. We'll get to that later this hour. Tony's got a show coming up at 11 o'clock today. I don't know if he'll have Wilbon on. I guess Wilbon was on the other day, but I'm sure he'll be talking about that and other things. We will get to that. And, of course, we'll do the draft. You got to do the draft, right? I mean, draft is what sustains us through April before we head into the long drought before we get back to real football when mini camps start, right? I mean, yeah, it's year-round stuff. In fact, I heard this the other day. Dan Patrick was talking about the death of Chris Mortensen, and he named 3 people as making football a year-round sport. One of them was Mort, who was like the original insider for ESPN, started with them in 1991. Then Peter King, who with his Monday morning column and just, being a guy who was always breaking news and nuggets and things like that, he made it year round. And Mel Kiper, who made the draft as relevant as it is. So, when football season's coming to an end, here comes Mel, and he's going to take you really through April. And then even the analysis that goes on, a couple of weeks after the draft, and then you start seeing how these guys do during the season. And then he's there in college football season to tell you how these guys translate to the NFL. And we're going to get Mel on before the draft. I'll have him on next month at some point, and we'll get talking about the draft. But I want to also talk to him about that, about how football has just eaten up everything else, especially pro football. College football's big too, and discussing what kind of playoff system we're going to have draws all kinds of emotion, and we'll get to that. But pro football, man, they own the calendar. Take off the month of July, but that is about it. Before we get back to the draft, Russell Wilson, as you know, is going to be released by the Denver Broncos, whatever date that becomes official. We got free agency starting next week. The legal tampering period, I put that in air quotes, legal tampering takes place next Monday and Tuesday, and then Wednesday they can officially announce all the signings, and that's where we'll see where these guys go, and we'll see how long Russell Wilson sits. He's in good shape financially. He's going to collect $39 million whether he plays or not next season, and whoever signs him can bring him in for the minimum. Though Andrew Brandt, who was a former cap guy with the Packers, probably knows more about sports business than anybody. He said, well, be careful on that. Before you assume whoever signs Russell Wilson is going to sign him for the minimum, teams look out for each other. And while they could stick it to the Broncos by signing him to just over $1 million, and the Broncos would have to pick up the other 38, teams don't do that to each other. So whoever would sign him might give him a reasonable deal. I remember when Robert Griffin III, and he didn't even get to a second deal here in Washington, they picked up his option for his fifth year, but at that time it wasn't guaranteed. So he walked, and look, Cleveland could have had him for $1 million. I think they gave him about $8 million for a guy who looked like he was a one-and-done kind of guy. I mean, he just was never the same in any way, not even close to what he was as a rookie, but they still give him $8 million. So it's possible Wilson will get more money. But interesting column today by Connor Orr, SI.com, who points out that maybe Russell Wilson really wasn't Russell Wilson after all. We spent all these years here kicking ourselves as fans, saying, God, if Russell Wilson would have just slipped down to the fourth round, they would have taken him, because Mike Shanahan had said that many times over the years, that, yes, they were going to take Robert Griffin, number 2. They had traded up to get him, but they were going to take another quarterback, and if Wilson got to the fourth round, they were taking him. Well, Wilson was taken in the third round by Denver, and they took Kirk Cousins in the fourth. If they took Russell Wilson, what would have happened with the whole RG3 Michigas? Because you would have taken a player who really had similar skills. But he winds up going, and this is all a big part of the draft process too. He winds up going to the Denver Broncos, to the Seattle Seahawks, which is a perfect situation for him. And as Orr writes, Wilson was always Wilson, though thanks to Seattle's incredibly elite core of speedy wide receivers, punishing run game, and a generational defense with a major schematic edge, he was granted a long runway of time with which to find himself as a player, develop some strengths, and a pinball through the development of an offense that could accentuate those strengths. Brian Schottenheimer, Darrell Bevell, Shane Waldron, and Dave Canales could rotate the podium just enough to create the illusion of a franchise quarterback. And we all went about our day gleefully, believing that an elephant in the room can simply vanish when a man in tight pants or a Seattle Seahawks cap and a windbreaker waves his hands. He's making a David Copperfield analogy there. Remember when David Copperfield made the Empire State Building disappear? It was all by rotating the podium there to do that. And as this analogy too from Orr about Russell Wilson in Seattle, he was a key to a Porsche being jammed into the ignition of a Honda Accord. And when you think about the team that he went to, it was a Porsche. If he'd have come here, it was not a very good team. Robert Griffin III was great as a rookie, and it was a great scheme that was put together by Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan. But if you had Russell Wilson here, would he have been as good at it when RG3 got hurt? How would that have worked out? A lot of things that we never got to find out, but we thought all these years, and now we've seen it play out, that maybe he really wasn't as great as we thought all along. Now he goes to Denver, and as Orr says, his willingness or ability to escape the pocket almost totally vanished, which impacted the team's ability to pick up some easy first downs. By the end of his first game in Orange, he was missing enough designed shots that the coach had to decide between two team captains with the game on the line and chose a kicker. His first coach, Nathaniel Hackett, was fired because we just weren't seeing Wilson as he truly was. Then by December of last year, Sean Payton and Wilson were screaming at each other on the sideline. The Broncos had made an attempt to move on from Wilson as the starting quarterback. He's going to be 36 next season, during the season, And he says, if anything, we should all be angry at Pete Carroll, Seahawks general manager John Schneider, and the troika of offensive coordinators for simply keeping the secret for so long. Wilson was a very good quarterback in a perfect situation. He will not go down as Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Drew Brees, who could draft 10 teammates from a line outside of Auntie Anne's pretzels and still score 21 points in a half. He will, however, go down as the ultimate illusion, a person who made us believe so sincerely that he had no choice but to believe in himself. So how about that? That is well done, and really, it's a really great rear view mirror picture of what we just saw and what we're probably going to see for whatever's left of his career. Meantime, Jayden Daniels debunking rumors. There's a rumor out there that he doesn't want the Patriots to select him. I even saw a rumor that he doesn't like Adam Peters. Who knows? So Daniels put out a simple cap emoji on X yesterday that insinuates the rumor is not true. And according to various reports, Bill Belichick loved Jayden Daniels. He was at the top of New England's draft board when Belichick was still there. They put together a draft board during the season, and had he stayed, would have tried to draft him. With Belichick gone, the Patriots apparently still have interest in Daniels. New England reportedly met with him at the Combine, along with fellow quarterback prospects Caleb Williams, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, and Bo Nix. It seems like they're going to have to settle for Drake May. This is Rich Eisen, does this every year. He's at the Combine, broadcasts all the 40 times and all the other stuff so he kind of hosts the Combine telecast for the days that it runs on the NFL Network. And when he gets back to do his radio show, he gives you things that he heard, rumors that he heard at the Combine, including this one.
Jayden Daniels is QB2 in this draft.
Ooh.
That's it. And the reasoning I keep hearing about it is him versus Drake May. And I know we're going to hear Orlovsky come up later, and I think he thinks he's QB1. There's a few people who think he's QB1.
Slow down.
I hear you. But the reason why he's above Drake May and the reason why you're hearing him as QB1 is every defensive coordinator or defensive coach that you come across at the Combine says this is the nightmare fuel when you're trying to stop a quarterback. And all you would hear from defensive coaches in the SEC that took this kid on, worst nightmare for them, prepping and playing all year. And so you'll hear Drake May this and what he can do that. I've been told that's a bunch of cheese you shouldn't take. That's QB2. That may be your Washington Commanders kid.
Just if you don't know the numbers, completed 72% of his passes, 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, ran for 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, 8.4 yards a carry. You think that Dan Quinn, the head coach, defensive coach, knows how good that guy can be and how devastating he can be to a defense and would like to have him on his side of the field rather than the other? Yeah, I think so. So, it seems that's the way the wind is blowing. It's blowing in that direction, but it can change course over the next 5 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever it is, before the draft. Also this yesterday from Ryan Leaf, who is kind of the poster boy for you shouldn't be thrown in there right away. Clearly wasn't ready. His career flamed out. one of the all-time busts in NFL history, and now has turned things around. He spent some time in jail, addicted to drugs, and now he's become, I think, a very good analyst. He's working for Fox and shows up on the Dan Patrick Show, and was on yesterday and was asked, well, if you were the Chicago Bears and you took Caleb Williams number 1, what would you do?
You better be under the understanding that you're going to sit him this year. And that's not going to happen. So
why would you sit him?
Well, because 75% of what he made him so great in college is not transferable to the NFL. He's not going to be able to do that. He can't do what he did in college 75% of the time and be successful at the NFL level. He can do the 25% part at the NFL level, but he needs some time. He needs to get under center. He needs to understand how to throw on time, on platform, from the pocket. What he can do off platform is what makes him so exciting, because he may be one of the most talented quarterbacks in this year's draft and many in the past year's draft. But he is a guy that I don't think can be a starter on day one. And I think they wanted to do that with Justin Fields, but like any team that drafts any quarterback in the top 5, you're expected to play immediately. And unfortunately, I don't think he's a starting quarterback this year. I think the 2 guys that I would put some faith in to be a starting quarterback this year would be probably Jayden Daniels and Michael Penix Jr. Those are the 2 guys I could see being a first-round pick that could start this season.
Not Drake May.
No, I got Drake May as a second-round guy. I see him in very same mold as Will Levis, which clearly worked out well for Will. None of the anchor he had to carry from being a first-round pick. Got the opportunity to sit, and when he took the opportunity, made the most of it, he's now their franchise quarterback. I see him very similar mold, those 2.
You love Penix.
I do love Michael Penix Jr. And it's tough for me to say, being a Washington guy, Washington State. So I just think he is the most accurate down-the-field passer I've seen come out of college, and I can't tell you when.
But you think he could start?
Yeah, I think he could be a starting quarterback, depending on what scheme he gets in. And the good thing for him is that not a lot of people are giving him a ton of credence. I think he may have moved the needle a bit at the combine, because he was special. He has the strongest arm of all the quarterbacks in the field this year. He's the most accurate down the field. He is a winner. The thing that was weighing him down was the medicals. People kept going back to that. 2 catastrophic injuries that ended season in Indiana. Well, he passed the medicals with flying colors. I didn't get injured during college, yet I got injured immediately in my second year in the NFL. You have no idea how that's going to play out. If you're going to start registering injury, being injury prone, you're going to go crazy thinking about all that stuff. So yeah, he's my number 1 guy. I've been on him for 2 years now, and I haven't moved off my spot. The national championship is going to be something that's going to weigh him down a little bit because of how good the defense was.
Well, they under pressure, he didn't do well at all.
No, but I don't know if there's a more of a counter or polarizing difference of a national semifinal game to how good he was to how bad he was in the national championship. Yeah. And that could be a little bit concerning. It was the worst possible time for him to have his worst game as a pro. But
that was an elite defense. That was a spectacular defense. And then you got J.J. McCarthy. I'm fixated on J.J. McCarthy. I think it's
the most fascinating part of it.
I don't get it.
I get why people would think he could be good. He's a 5-star kid out of Illinois. He goes to Michigan. He's lost 3 games his entire career in high school and college. He's a winner. But how can a guy who's Superman for you in a game, let's say against Penn State, where Jim Harbaugh he's out and suspended, they don't ask him to throw the ball once in the second half. Yeah. I know he was banged up a little bit, but I mean, I don't care. There's something that throws me off a little bit with that I'd be like, well, do we venture to risk a first-round draft pick on a guy that can be literally put on the shelf for a half against one of your biggest rivals in conference play? So I have him as a second-round guy. Again, we all know that there are not 32 necessarily first-round grades to go around. The quarterbacks are always given more. I think Penix Jr. could easily be a guy that we see what Baltimore did a few years back with Lamar Jackson, jumped back up into the first round, got a guy with the 5th-year option. I think Penix could be that guy late in the first round. Wouldn't surprise me if J.J. McCarthy goes earlier than that. I don't know if it's necessarily warranted, but again, if you fall in love with somebody, they'll go do it.
Yeah, I mean, that's what happened. I mean, Tim Tebow was taken in the first round by Denver, who, as we know, other than Peyton Manning, recently has had its share of blown quarterback decisions. So, yeah, somebody may fall in love with him. The problem with Penix is he's not very big, and he was hurt a lot at Indiana. And he's been beaten up and played 5 years of college football. And just like you look at the semifinal versus the final, big difference. You're playing a defense that has a bunch of NFL caliber players on it. Not that they didn't in the semifinal, but getting beat the way they did by Michigan in the championship, I think, is going to hurt them. But, as they say, it only takes one. There's only going to be one team that goes, we got to have Michael Penix Jr., and we'll do whatever it takes, and we're going to jump up into the first round to get him. So we'll see. You remember 4 or 5 years ago when we used to talk about the Redskins changing their name before essentially Dan Snyder was forced to do it, when his partners went to him and said, well, if you don't change the name, we're going to take the naming rights off the stadium, and Pepsi and Nike were going to fall into place. And so he was forced to change the name. A lot of people think that the name change happened because of the Washington Post reporting about the sexual harassment in the organization. That was before that. That followed. But the name change was due to financial pressure. He was going to lose a lot of money if he didn't change the name. So that's when they went to Washington Football Team and ultimately Commanders. And I don't know this, but just from observing Josh Harris, he's not in love with the name Commanders. When he first came on as the owner, he threw around the name Redskins so much that people said, he's going to change the name back. Well, they're not going to change the name back to Redskins. But they don't like Commanders. It appears to me. I don't know this. It just seems that way. And so the Washington Times has a story today about merchandise sales. And when we used to talk about the name change, we used to say, well, if they change the name, man, are they going to make money? People buying the new merchandise. They're not. They're not buying the new merchandise. In a recent season-ending review, the NFL recapped some of the best sellers from the league's online shop. The Chiefs, no surprise, led overall sales. San Francisco running back Christian McCaffrey was the most popular player in the online shop. Last month, the NFL Players Association listed only one Commanders player among the top 50 most popular. That was Terry McLaurin, who was at 38. The retailer Lids reported their best-selling jerseys last month included players from playoff teams like the Cowboys, Chiefs, and 49ers. No Washington players were even on that list. And even in this area, Jalen Hurts led jersey sales in Virginia. Virginia which is the state where the team practices. And Lamar Jackson sold the most jerseys in Maryland. Not a surprise. Maryland, of course, Baltimore, part of Maryland. But this, I think, adds more fuel to the idea that the name is going to change again. And Jeffrey Wright, I didn't know this. He's up for an Academy Award in the movie American Fiction, which I've seen. Very good. So he may win an Academy Award next week. He grew up in D.C. His mother was a season ticket holder. And he went to camp with Josh Harris, who he's talked to, and he came away with the impression that they're going to change the name. So this is proof that they weren't going to sell a lot of jerseys if they changed the name. Some of it has to do with the fact that they stink. The good teams sell more jerseys. That makes sense. But this name, Commanders, isn't providing any real magic for them. And as I've said, they ought to go back to Washington Football Team and stick with it. For those of us who grew up as Redskin fans, there's never going to be a name that's satisfying enough to replace it. So just don't replace it at all. Just call them the Washington Football Team. Makes them unique. Same way the Cleveland Browns don't have a logo on their helmet. Same way the Steelers don't have a logo on one side of the helmet. That will be their uniqueness. Washington Football Team. You can change. I think the W's okay if they stay with that or they change that a little bit. Go back to more traditional uniforms, the real burgundy and gold, not this nonsense that was designed by Tanya Snyder. And I think that, they pick up some momentum. They already have because of the ownership change. That's true addition by subtraction with Dan Snyder out. But here's some numbers that are telling you, hey, they changed the logo and the fans aren't going out or change the uniforms, change the name of the team. Fans aren't going out to buy the gear. That's not happening. You'd think, I'm a fan of the football team. I got to have the up-to-date gear. There's some, but there ain't that much. Coming up, Joey Votto got his nose pressed against the glass after a great career with the Cincinnati Reds, 17 years, MVP, 6-time All-Star, still wants to play. And I think it's an interesting listen
to hear his passion for the game of baseball, even though it seems like he's squeezed everything out of a career you could possibly have. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
We got Tony coming up at 11 o'clock today. I mentioned the rating yesterday for the Caitlin Clark game against Ohio State on Sunday. More than 4 million people watched it at its peak. The average viewership, 3.39 million, reaching a high of 4.42 late in the second half. That was after she broke the record, by the way, broke the record in the first half. No other women's regular season game on any network has had more viewers since the 3.8 million for the UConn-Tennessee game in January 1999. As I recall, that was either on Martin Luther King's birthday or President's Day. That was a really hyped game. That was when UConn was just becoming UConn, and Tennessee had been the dominant program, and you had the two coaches, Gino Auriemma and the Pat Summitt. They were both, the titans of women's college basketball. They're maybe the two greatest coaches ever. And that was a really hyped game. It was a standalone, on a holiday Monday. So that drew a big audience at a time when more people had cable too. This game was not on cable. It was on Fox. But it just goes to show you just the impact that she has had. I call her the Babe Ruth of women's basketball. And the only game this year, any game, men or women's game, which did better, was the 5.1 million that saw the Michigan State-Arizona game. But that followed the Thanksgiving game on Fox. So that would have been, right? I guess that would have been the Cowboys game. So, yeah, people just leave the TV on, or they fall asleep in front of the TV. So this was a game that you had to tune into. So 1 o'clock start on a Sunday afternoon, not much else going on, and people tuned into it. So that really shows you the impact that she's had, and the fact that more people were watching after the record was broken. That tells you something else too, because you figure you want to see history. You want to see her break the record, which turned out to be anticlimactic. She missed a logo three, a little short, but got fouled with 0.3 seconds left and sunk the free throw that broke Pete Maravich's record. So it's just amazing the impact that she has had on women's college basketball, and we'll see if she's able to take that momentum into the WNBA, where she's going to be playing for the Indiana Fever next year. Joey Votto played 17 years with the Cincinnati Reds. He was an All-Star 6 times. He hit 356 home runs with them, 2,100 hits, MVP in 2010 when he had 37 home runs and hit 324. He is 40 years old. Because of injuries, he's played only 154 games combined over the last 2 years, and his batting average in the 2 years, 205 and 202. Last year, playing 60-some games, I remember one of his home runs, one of the 6 he hit, I saw in person at Nats Park, but he's not what he was. And the Reds have said, okay, great career, thank you for everything, but we're not going to bring you back. And you would think, okay, Capper, great career, 17 years, same organization, that doesn't happen very often. And the numbers would suggest that he might be a Hall of Famer someday. Maybe not a first ballot guy, but he might get there. He's not done with it. And, we saw the tearful news conference that Jason Kelce had the other day, how hard it was to walk away from football. This is Joey Votto with Dan Patrick. He often jokes around, but he is dead serious here. He wants to play, and listen to the passion in which he says it.
My attitude is prepare for the season, be available for anything that comes my way, and then just work. I'll be sincere for a moment, realizing, that jobs aren't flowing. You miss the game. The love I feel is coming to the forefront for the game, and I still feel a longing to compete. And I think I'm still good. I really do. Yeah, it's just a beautiful game. I miss the spring and the summer weather. I miss the stadiums. I miss the time in the batter's box. You brought up 300 at-bats. Every single one of those at-bats is memorable and special. And when you don't have them in front of you, you realize how much you miss them.
How scary is retirement?
Yeah, I think I think the reason why it's concerning to me is because look, I can't I refuse to make an excuse about my shoulder injury and its recovery. I refuse to, but I do know it was a factor, and the idea of being this, spirit wandering, the middle earth without that sort of finality to my career is intimidating to me. I feel like I feel like I'm in a bit of there's a possibility that if I don't play again, I'll be in a bit of a purgatory of not having the opportunity to prove to myself it's over, or no, you can still do it and at full strength. And so that's the thing that stands out the most to me. I get excited about the idea of retirement, traveling, doing some traveling, hopefully starting a family one day, having a consistent routine, but I'm just not there yet mentally, and I've prepared as much as I possibly could have.
Yeah, it's sometimes retirement chooses you. You don't choose retirement. And right now you have teams, by their inactivity, are really giving you the message that maybe you don't want to, consume, but it might be the reality that you won't have an opportunity to play again.
Yeah, to be fair, though, the free agent market has ground to a halt. Last year's Cy Young winner still doesn't have a job. There's plenty of likely 9-figure players, certainly 8-figure contract players that don't have jobs yet. I don't know what to say other than you may be absolutely correct. But that's not a language I speak to myself. When I was coming up through the minor leagues, when I was coming up in high school, I remember being outside of a batting cage, and I'm 16, 17 years old, and a boy says to me, what are you going to do after high school? And I said without hesitation, I'm going to play professional baseball. And he laughed in my face. And he was like, what are you talking about, dude? Give me a break. And that hurt. And then I remember being in the minor leagues, and someone asked me, what do how long do you want to play in the major leagues for? And I said, what do you mean? I'm going to win multiple most valuable players. I just don't operate in a way that I don't think I'm ready. I don't feel like I have that quit language, and I want someone to, just finish me as far as I'm trying to think of an appropriate, for this G show, but just stomp on my skull and finish me, and I'm going to keep fighting all the way to the end, sort of thing.
It sounds like he wants to go to a camp. He wants to be proven to himself, I guess. They can't play anymore. Now, again, last 2 years, hit barely over 200, fighting shoulder injury, which he says he won't blame his performance on. But at 40 years old, what's the reality? Now, if it was his last at bat at the end of last season, if he's not going to get another chance to play, he didn't exactly walk away like Ted Williams, who homered in his last time at bat.
I was ejected from the game. We were in St. Louis on a day game, right? You're laughing. I was in St. Louis it was a day game. And by the way, St. Louis fans gave me a lovely applause when I walked up to bat. I mean, what generosity. But I remember vividly being in a foul mood when I walked up, ready to compete. And, I struck out, went back to the dugout, and I went underneath and I slammed the bat. I was actually quite disappointed that I was so upset that I slammed the bat after the strikeout, and went to the dugout, snagged an iPad, looked at that bat, saw that it was not a strike. during the middle of the bat, which is typically when you don't get upset. And I start hollering at the umpire. And he's a great umpire with a steady demeanor, but you can't holler from the bench bullying or just, disrupting the game. And he threw me out. And I ran up to him, and I wasn't even angry. I ran up to him and I go, that ball's inside. This could be my last game. I said those words. This could be the last game. And he said, why'd you get thrown out, Joey? Why did you yell at me? You knew that this was going to prompt an ejection. And I said, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. All right. Have a good game. Take care. And I you see on the video, I touch him on his side or on his arm. And I said, you're absolutely right. All right. Take care. That was it.
Sayonara. If that's the last at bat, that's the last at bat. Steve Tasker, who has had consideration for the Hall of Fame and may now get in, that Devin Hester has made it. A special teamer has made it to the Hall of Fame. Tasker was not a returner. He was just a great, great special teams player for the Buffalo Bills on those Super Bowl teams. His last game in the NFL, he was ejected from. So Joey Votto and Steve Tasker may have that in common. The last time that Joey Votto played in Major League Baseball, he was ejected from the game. So there's that to stand out for. Why not? But he's obviously very good on the air. He'll get a job somewhere, and if he wants to in broadcasting, I think that's there. But what he's saying is he really wants to be proven that he can't play anymore. He thinks he can still play. He wants to go to a place, and as he said, I want to be stomped on. And whether he'll get that opportunity again, I don't know. It'd be nice if the Cincinnati Reds said, okay, one last hurrah. But they've had 2 seasons of not really being able to count on him enough because of the injuries, and I don't think they want to go through that again. But, man, that's kind of heartbreaking. Not that we should hold the benefit for Joey Votto, who made a lot of money playing baseball. Understand that, and had a career that lasted 3 times longer, I'm sure, than the average career, 17 years. But the draw to still get out there with all that he's done, it's still there. The fire still burns. Not everybody loves baseball, and not everybody who plays football loves football. But the guys who really do well and stay in it a long time, you have to love the game, and obviously he loves the game. Anyway, that's a wrap for me. Tony is coming up next, and I will see you back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.